and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Andrew.
I'm Jesi.
I'm Ari.
And I'm Josh.
Wait, let me do it. Hey, Jeremy, what do you know about holes?
There are simply no holes in my education.
Okay, we're going over holes by a little sacred.
It's a Yellow Submarine movie reference.
Okay. That was a trippy movie.
I really liked it though.
Oh dear.
I've liked it so much that I've almost I've watched it so many times that I just really enjoy it.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I've seen snippets of it, but that's about it. Want to do the discussion starter?
All right. Yes. It took me a while to figure this one because there's a lot of different things you can discuss in this book. But I think the one I wanted to look at is kind of similar to the question I started with Lorax, but it has a slightly different twist in it. I feel like in this story, Stanley L. Natsu, who is the main character, is basically brought to Camp Green Lake, because of circumstances involving continuous mess-ups in his life, continuous failings, and even when he's at Camp Green Lake, when he's with all the other people, he continues to feel like he's doing stuff wrong. But my question is, in this book, how do you feel the other characters' reactions influenced Stanley's trek during the second half of the book?
The character. I think that outside of Zero, it seems like
not including Zero because he was more important.
The other students or the other, do you want to call? You can't call them kids. Yeah, you can't really call them inmates.
Yeah, no, that's a good point when you call them.
But they seemed like a general group of they seemed like a general group of kids where they were a bit shallow and misunderstanding. But I think that there are a lot of kids their age, or a lot of kids that you see in other forms of media that act like that. But I think that Mr. Pandansky or Mom, Mr. Sir, and the Warden, I feel that they were very harsh. Granted, the deal that Stanley cut with Zero, I think that part of the deal was a bit. I think they could have done away with that, but the fact that they wouldn't let Stanley teach Zero how to read, that was a little too harsh.
There was a couple of instances there. I thought it was going to be solved towards the end. I didn't know why Mr. Pandansky was he was really rough with Zero, and I thought there would be some explanation of why. In the beginning, he wanted to be this benevolent counselor. It's come to me, we can rap, and But and then it was Zero, that piece of crap. He can't learn.
I think what it.
I think he just gave up on him at that point.
Oh, I think that's what it is with Zero. I think everybody kind of gave up on him. But I also feel that, like you said, in the beginning when Stanley first meets Mom. He comes across as this hey, come to me if you need anything. But as the story goes on, and he's pointing out things or noticing things, like Mom saying, "Oh well, Zero, forget about him. He doesn't know anything. He's stupid. He's dumb." And start
really
saying, I think instead of him, the character Mr. Pandansky changing, I think it's just showing what his true colors are, because there's a few times towards the end of the book where he's actually kind of a jerk. He's just a jerk. Well, so I think that's more the true colors.
I think he's a jerk throughout the whole book, and I just think depending on what's happening in front of him, he acts slightly differently.
I think everybody at Camp Green Lake can be considered a jerk because it's
both the staff and the people around Stanley.
It's the nicest way of saying it.
It's their boot camp kind of system, only it's not boot camp as in they're yelling down your neck.
Here's the thing, I was just quickly browsing through it, and there was a point I literally just came across when Andrew was talking about how Zigzag is pushing Stanley, and Stanley's the bigger person, and so everyone wants him to fight back, and he does it, but then Mr. Pandansky says, fight back.
Yeah, that's right, I remember that.
That is such a ridiculous
That's what
reaction.
got him in the situation in the first place, because Derek Doone was the bully at his school that caused him to be in that situation where the sneakers fell on him. Derek Doon took his notebook and threw it in the toilet.
Mm-hmm. That's
So, and Derek Doon was smaller than him too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call this kind of I guess more of, I don't want to say a children's book, but I feel like it's not as like young adults.
Reading level 4.5, 10 and up.
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good book where, like, the Lorax, it's trying to get across, certain messages, and obviously more complicated messages than the Lorax because it's meant for an older group. But with this, it shows who you are inside doesn't always necessarily reflect who you are on the outside. Just because you're bigger doesn't mean you're tough. All right,
Mm-hmm.
it's not who you are on the outside; it's who you are on the inside.
Absolutely.
Not only that, I also feel this really kind of tackles a concept that kids are learning about at this age, which is fate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really strong topic to, start introducing to kids because, we see a lot in books and don't realize it. Whereas, all of these things, going back to your question, all of these things were happening because of some curse that was put on the Yelnats family, or all the Stanley Yelnats. And
Because of Elia.
Exactly. Would any of these things have happened if that one thing didn't happen?
Actually,
So-
I really like how it goes, and it's not just about Stanley. There are other stories within this book.
I think that
It's
the
generational.
flashbacks
Yeah.
were just amazing.
Oh, they were
And
great.
how Zeroni tied in with the gypsy woman,
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah,
So
Madam
all the
Zeroni.
generations kind of met.
Like with, what's her name, Kissing Kate Barlow.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
quite.
She was
Which
fun.
Kisses Kate Barlow robbed one of the Yelnats, but
Yeah.
I felt a sense of sympathy for her because I felt Trout was a dick.
Yeah.
That was his character.
But-
Yeah,
he was
the fact that because he couldn't get his way, he goes and causes Kissing Kate a miserable life, and
with
then,
one of her star pupils, no less.
yeah, he was a star pupil.
I mean,
but
it doesn't,
he wanted
it doesn't,
to be
No,
matter,
no,
it
that
doesn't
the
matter
girl he
who it
hooked up
is,
with.
you know?
Oh.
Yeah.
And-
It doesn't matter.
I mean, just again, kind of retouching on the whole fate thing. Would that have happened to Kissing Kate Barlow, where she turned into this outlaw that ultimately ended up robbing Stanley Yelnats's great-great-grandfather or something? If his great-great-great-great-grandfather was never cursed, would that have happened?
Is no good, dirty,
Yeah.
rotten, pig stealing great great
Oh
grandpa.
yeah.
That one.
That's awesome.
That's an interesting one to look at because
I don't know, but
with
Yeah, it is a
Kissing
good
Kate
point.
Barlow, she's in a completely different situation where she gets caught kissing Sam, the black man who gives people who has
Ointments.
onion
ointments.
ointments, and has that donkey Mary Lou.
Yeah.
Which I loved their story. I thought their
Yeah, it's
story
good.
was
It was
so
a nice
sweet,
story.
but it was also like so sad, like bittersweet, I guess, too, because it's sad. Unfortunately, again, the book touches on a great topic. That was something that actually happened in history, where if a woman fell in love with a black man in the time, they got caught kissing. Guess who got punished for it? It wasn't her. It was him, and that is just it's such a sad story. But again, something that the kids are learning about, and it kind of shows them, how sad those kind of things were, and how unfair
In
it
this
was to people.
In the present day, though, race doesn't play as big a
no.
role. There's things that play a role, but there are plenty of. Actually, have them listed. You have half of them are. It's out of the 7 of them in the original group. It's Stanley, Squid, and Zigzag are white. X-Ray, Armpit, and Zero are black, and then Magnet is Hispanic.
That's funny. I did the same thing. I said Alan White, Rex Black. I don't know why.
Actually, that
it
kind
stood
of.
out for some reason.
Well, that's, and I think in a way that kind of shows a sort of like, diversity, or like how things are starting to equal out. And it's just the best way I can explain it. It's, in the past, it was usually more young black children who were thrown in jail for something terrible that maybe they didn't even do, or even something little that they didn't do.
That immediately
And-
leads into, and I don't think it's really appropriate to discuss it, too much on this, but it leads into the present issues we're having with Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that may not be the most appropriate thing to discuss right now. It is relevant to it, isn't it?
And that's what makes it, you know, a good book to still read for this day and age. So it can show a lot of different perspectives for young kids.
Another interesting thing, the fact that the warden was a woman. The fact that at first,
a very glamorous woman.
That's a very glamorous woman.
The first impression would be that the warden is a big, burly man.
True. Good point. Yeah.
But at first,
you also have
I was
Mr.
having
Sir and Mr. Pendansky.
Yeah, I was having that idea that that there was no warden, or the warden was there was definitely some kind of twist, but it turns out being a
I like the reveal.
Thin. What about
about when they first described the warden?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a thin, red-headed, glamorous woman who took a different, which
what?
and again, I think that kind of goes back to how the times are changing. So you know, here it's showing a woman in power. So you know, again, that's not something that if you went back to, you know, Kissing Kate Barlow, she wasn't in power. Whereas now you have a woman who is in power.
She was a distant relative of Kissing Kate Barlow.
Yes, exactly.
Too.
So
and
that's showing the difference.
And she would use
and that's why
kids that committed bad deeds to do this as punishment.
Wait, was she the relative of Kissing? I thought she was the relative of Trout and that woman. Because that was who Kissing Kate Barlow died in front of.
Oh, it could have been because
they started.
KB was on the KB was on the
the lipstick thing.
Yeah.
I do have one point that I would like to bring up to you guys. I have a question, and that is: do you think the thumb of God symbolized anything of relevance?
The thumb of you mean
the mountain?
The mountain.
The mountain.
Do you think that symbolized something other than the fact that's where they're going?
As it could have been
I think
metaphor
it was
for
mentioned-
providence.
That's what I think.
There was the
Peter
mountain.
said.
The mountain was first referred to in the Elya's story, where he has to bring the pig up to the mountain and keep making it heavy. So when it goes up, it's going to.
But like, do you think it has any emotional significance once Stanley and Zero run away from camp? Like I think it does. I think it basically is a.
It put the.
Well, it was direction. It pointed them to a direction, and it all ended up saving them because those onions saved them from the lizards.
Exactly. That's exactly.
That's like a guidance.
That's kind of what I was.
And they got their guidance. Their representatives.
Which I mean, ultimately, if you want to get a little bit deeper into it, that's all religion really is like guidance. So here you have the perfect symbol of God's thumb is guiding them.
Right. Yeah.
Faith is
So-
a fine invention, right?
Exactly.
Oh yes, indeed. But something that was interesting. One thing that I can't stop laughing at is how Elya was pursuing Myra.
Yeah.
That was just so. When you have there was a tie between the two pigs, and Myra can't make a decision, so
It's funny.
I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10. What a dick!
Yeah.
What a dick! You're choosing between someone who is your age, he's a pretty cool guy,
Who loves you?
and an older man, 50 years older, who's probably just looking to get in bed,
Yeah.
and
He's like, yeah. There's a lot of words we can use.
Yeah,
it's
you're
like
not going to
because this is literary.
it's like, would you like a
That's ridiculous.
a steak or a nice piece of cheese or a prune?
I do not want a prune. Thank you very much. The only prune I want is Charles, but. We love you,
Not on camera,
Charles.
not on camera.
The only people that consume prunes are the ones that have
I like a nice steak, okay? I like a nice steak.
Ari's a mistake, I see.
There'll be much more at stake if you do that again.
You know that Ari's girlfriend is in this room.
And he just leaves the building. Charles Galizzi has left the building. Alright.
Already then.
Now Leah's blocking the door.
Oh boy. Too bad nobody at home can see this.
Are you really jealous of him, Leah?
Trevor, stay on your feet.
I'm trying to. I'm just trying to prevent myself from turning the camera around to catch all what's back there.
Nobody knows.
There's not much
Okay.
going on back there.
Back to
Back to
pleasure.
business.
Back to holes. By Lewis
Back to
Hector.
Green Lake.
Do we have anything we needed to bring up? Final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? Well, I mean, it's a really good book, and I suggest that no matter what your age, you should definitely check it out. That's what I personally do.
It was,
I agree.
yeah, it was really paced well. It was a really good, solid story throughout. Yeah.
Once again, this was one of those books that, I read when I was younger, so reading it as an adult kind of changed my perspective on it. As a kid, it was just a book that I had to read in school. Now it's something more important that's got more depth to it.
Something I do have to say about this book that's interesting for a book of this length, meaning it's pretty short and it's a young adult book, is that there's actually quite a lot of characters in a book this short.
Yeah, there is.
And yet you feel for even for the negative characters, like you feel for every character in this book. There's not even the flashback characters, even the people who are with
To a degree.
Except Sweet Feet. Give it.
And I don't mean when I mean maybe not
You're
feel.
not talking about Trap.
What? No, Clive Livingston, the athlete.
Oh, the athlete.
Yeah,
Okay.
I could, whatever.
yeah.
He was important to the story, but I didn't care about him.
Maybe
Yeah.
not.
Seemed cool.
Feel might not be the right word. It might be that their presence is there. Like they're not full-fledged characters, but they're enough characters to be like important to the story. And
I didn't
it's
feel
really
any.
hard to
I
do
didn't
that.
feel any sympathy for Trout. I didn't feel sympathy for Myra. I didn't feel sympathy for Igor or Myra's father.
There's actually quite a few people in this book. It's hard to feel. You shouldn't feel sympathy for, but
I think that there are plenty of other characters in a way, in some way, shape, or form that you feel a bit of sympathy for whatever reason.
I think you feel with all the characters, you feel something for every single one. And not a lot of books, there's characters there that are just there. Hear what you're saying.
I know what it is. I know what I'm trying to say.
You're feeling
The
something.
characters are fleshed out better.
Yes.
There are a lot. Like
That's a good
here's
thing.
the thing, and this is just a personal opinion. With Harry Potter, especially the last 3 books, I feel like even though they're big books, a lot of the characters are not fleshed out in a way that I can understand them. But in this book, like this is a much smaller book, and yet I feel like I understand empathetically each character.
I think it grew darker after the death of Cedric Diggory in the Harry Potter
Yeah,
series.
and that's why everything kind of...
Well, we can talk about Harry Potter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another
Anyway, sorry.
episode.
Already. How would we rate it on a 0 to 5 scale? Half stars permitted. Andrew?
I'm gonna give it a 4.5 because I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't know, a 4.5. Because also, I didn't read this when I was younger. I read this as an adult, and
That's me too.
I could understand how I would appreciate it when I don't know if it makes any sense, but I'm giving it a high grade for a unique reason. But I mean, yeah, I'm gonna stay with that 4.5. Yeah.
And I'm probably going to go with a 4 just because, like you said, it's a very unique kind of book. How, the author intertwines everybody and everything, kind of brings everything to a nice end, a nice closure. And it's enjoyable, for all ages. So I would give it a 4.
So I'm also going to give it a 4. Instead of coming up with my own quote, there's actually a quote in the first, like the beginning of the book, like where they say quotes about the book. And in this case, it says, "Imaginative plotting and memorable characters make this novel a winner," from Book Magazine. I think that that's exactly like what I think about this book, is that characters are memorable. I think that everything that happens in this book is well realized, and I think it's just fun to read. You feel for Stanley almost every second of the day, so.
I'm giving it a 5.
Oh, wow.
Because I think that this book
A
does
5.
This book does everything that a children's book needs to do in being able to entertain readers, but at the same time deliver a strong message that both children, adults, and young adult readers can relate to. Lewis Sachar, he was known for the Wayside series, Sideway Stories from Wayside School, and those were just so ridiculous and out of the ordinary in a good way. They were absurd. But Holes, he incorporates some of those elements when necessary, but yet he puts together such an incredible story. Very well fleshed out in all areas, character, setting, plot, and his techniques too, and the mechanics that he incorporates. And I think the chapters were arranged nicely as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Everything you just said is true.
Ready? Ari has the copy of Holes that people are most familiar with. If you're interested in
I've
checking
got the
out,
ladder.
I have the paperback
Yeah.
that looks like Andrew's.
Oh wow, yours is like more stout.
Yeah, this is a mass market.
It's a stout book.
It's the one that was at Barnes and Noble when I
Yeah,
was
that's the
looking
word
for
I
it.
should have used. Mass market. Yours
I like
is
stout
It's
better.
a mass market's politically correct.
Stout is more
I got the husky.
personified.
Yeah.
I think that the mass market books are going to be picketing in front of your house.
Yeah, really.
I deserve it.
And meanwhile, the stouts will be crowing at the bar. That's another story altogether.
You know what? If this was a sports book, you want to know what it would be called?
I'm afraid to ask.
Oh, no.
I'm afraid
It would be
to hear
called Goals by Lewis Sachar.
Oh wow. That's
When am I gonna learn?
So funny.
Keep reading!
Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators, and for now, keep reading!
Keep reading! Yeah!